Your sister may partner while you're still playing entrepreneur, Dad announced in front of everyone. Just then Mom's phone buzzed. She read it out loud. Why is your company listed at $1 billion in the Wall Street Journal? The whole room went quiet. I still remember the exact moment, the air thick with judgment, when my father looked at me, his voice laced with dismissal and said, "You're trying to make me into something you've never understood." It felt like a punch to the gut, a familiar ache, because he'd never truly tried to understand what I was building. My mother, usually my quiet champion, just looked pained, muttering, "Rachel, please, your father just wants what's best for you." But I corrected her, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. He wants what he thinks is best for me. There's a difference. And as I turned to leave, ready to walk out of that suffocating room, the strangest thing happened. My mother's phone buzzed, a loud, insistent vibration in her pocket. She automatically pulled it out, her eyes scanning the notification. Her expression, which had been a mix of concern and resignation, shifted to utter confusion. "Diana, we're in the middle of something important," my father admonished, impatient. But my mother wasn't listening to him. She was staring at her phone, then looking up at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Gregory," she said slowly, her voice barely a whisper, "you might want to see this." My father, ever the pragmatist, scoffed. What could possibly be more important than this family discussion? My mother just looked directly at me, then read aloud from her phone, the words hanging in the air like a bomb. "Why is your company valued at $1 billion? I am the Wall Street Journal." The room froze. Every single eye in that living room, from my aunt and uncle to my sister Emily, snapped to me. Their expressions ranged from utter confusion to outright disbelief. "What?" I managed, my voice so faint I could barely hear it myself. My mother blinked rapidly, looking back at her phone. "It's a Wall Street Journal news alert. Healthcare startup Connect Care valued at $1 billion in potential acquisition talks with Pharmac Global." She looked up at me again, her gaze piercing. "Rachel, is this your company?" I couldn't process it. Pharmac Global? One of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world? We'd been in early discussions with their innovation department about potential collaboration, but nothing, absolutely nothing, remotely close to acquisition talks had ever been mentioned. And $1 billion valuation? My mind reeled. "I need to see that," I said, crossing the room in 3 quick strides. My mother handed me her phone, and I stared at the headline, my fingers trembling. Emily was already pulling out her own phone, her professional skepticism unable to mask her shock. "Is this some kind of mistake?" she asked. I scrolled through the article, my heart pounding. According to the Wall Street Journal's healthcare technology reporter, Malene Torres, Pharmac Global was in advanced talks to acquire Connect Care for an estimated $1 billion, primarily for our revolutionary patient matching algorithm. Our algorithm, the one that demonstrated unprecedented accuracy in connecting rare disease patients with appropriate clinical trials. The article even quoted an unnamed source within Pharmac saying our technology could revolutionize clinical trial recruitment and potentially save the pharmaceutical industry billions in failed trial costs, while dramatically accelerating rare disease treatment development. As I read, several things hit me simultaneously. My phone was vibrating constantly in my purse. The room around me had erupted into confused chatter, and my father had moved to read over my shoulder, his expression shifting from dismissal to absolute astonishment. "Rachel," he said, his voice entirely different now, softer, almost reverent. "Is this accurate?" I finally checked my own phone. 17 missed calls from Jasmine, my business partner. 5 from our lawyer, Samuel. 3 from a number I didn't recognize with the New York area code. Dozens of text messages and email notifications. I don't know, I admitted, my voice still shaky. "We've been in talks with Pharmac about a potential partnership, but nothing like this. I need to call Jasmine." I stepped out onto the porch, the cool evening air doing little to calm my shaking hands. I called Jasmine and she answered on the first ring, her voice pitched higher than normal with excitement. "Rachel. Finally. Have you seen it? The Wall Street Journal article." "Yes, I just saw it." "What's happening, Jasmine?" "We weren't in acquisition talks." "We are now," she said, breathless. "Daniel Rodriguez from Pharmac called right after our breakthrough last night. He said their team has been monitoring our progress, and the accuracy improvements put us over their threshold for serious interest. When I told him we were hitting 95% match rates for certain conditions, he almost fell off his chair." I gripped the porch railing for support. "But $1 billion? That's insane." "It's our algorithm, Rachel," Jasmine explained rapidly. "You know how Pharmac spent $3.7 billion on clinical trials last year, and how over 80% of trials failed to recruit enough patients. Our system solves their most expensive problem. Daniel said their internal valuation shows we could save them more than $2 billion annually while accelerating their drug development pipeline by years." My mind flashed back to all those late nights, the endless iterations of code, the meetings with patients and doctors to understand the real-world problems we were trying to solve. All those moments when we felt like we were shouting into the void, trying to convince people that what we were building mattered. But how did the Wall Street Journal find out? I asked, my brow furrowed. We haven't agreed to anything. That's the thing, Jasmine said, her voice dropping. I think Pharmac leaked it. Samuel thinks they're trying to establish a public valuation to justify the purchase to their board and shareholders. He's been going crazy trying to reach you. We need to meet with the legal team immediately. I glanced back through the window at my family, who were huddled around Emily's phone, presumably reading the full article. I'm at my parents' house, I said, a strange, almost hysterical laugh bubbling up. They were staging an intervention to convince me to shut down the company. Jasmine was silent for a moment. You're kidding. I wish I was, I said. My father just told everyone that my sister made partner while I play entrepreneur. Then my mom got the news alert. Oh my God, Jasmine whispered. That's actually kind of perfect timing despite everything. I smiled. It really is. Then, becoming serious again, I'll head to the office now. Call Samuel and tell him I'll be there in 30 minutes. When I stepped back into the living room, the atmosphere had transformed completely. My father was on his phone, apparently reading the article himself, his face a mask of awe. Emily was explaining something about unicorn valuations to our aunt and uncle. My mother was simply staring at me with wide eyes, a mixture of pride and bewilderment. I need to go, I announced, my voice firm. There's apparently a situation I need to address with my team. My father looked up, his tone now almost deferential. Rachel, why didn't you tell us your company was in talks with Pharmac Global? Because we weren't in acquisition talks until apparently today, I replied honestly. And even our partnership discussions were under NDA non-disclosure agreement, I added, glancing at Emily, who translated for the room unnecessarily. Bradley, the financial advisor who had been ready to explain why my business was doomed just minutes earlier, now stepped forward with an outstretched hand. Congratulations, Rachel. What an extraordinary achievement. I didn't take his hand. Thank you, but I really need to go. Of course, my father said quickly, practically ushering me out. This is obviously an important business matter. We didn't mean to keep you from something so significant. The irony was almost too much to bear. I looked around at the room full of people who had gathered specifically to convince me to abandon my vision. Actually, I said quietly, my voice cutting through the suddenly awkward silence, that's exactly what this meeting was designed to do. My father had the grace to look uncomfortable. Rachel, we were concerned. We didn't have all the information, he offered weakly. No, I agreed. You didn't. But you were quite comfortable making judgments anyway. I turned to leave, then paused. I'll let you all know how things develop. Right now, I need to speak with my team and our lawyers. As I walked out the door, I heard my mother call after me. Rachel, wait. She hurried down the front steps. I just want to say, I'm proud of you. I always have been. I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes, but also remembering her silence during my father's dismissal of my work. Thanks, Mom, I said simply, unable to fully process my complicated feelings in that moment. As I drove toward our office, my phone continued to buzz with notifications. The story was spreading beyond the Wall Street Journal now, with TechCrunch, Bloomberg, and other outlets picking it up. Our website traffic had increased by 3,000% in the past hour. I thought about all the times I doubted myself over the past 2 years. The nights I'd lay awake wondering if everyone else was right, if I was being foolishly idealistic, if I was wasting my potential. I thought about Timothy walking out, saying he needed someone more stable. I thought about my father's dismissive tone when he talked about my little startup. Then I thought about Eliza, the 12-year-old who had accessed a life-changing clinical trial through our platform. I thought about Jasmine's unwavering belief in our vision, even when investors turned us down. I thought about the breakthrough we'd achieved just last night, not knowing it would trigger this tsunami. My entire life was about to change, I realized. And ironically, it was happening just hours after my family had gathered to stage an intervention about my failure. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of conference calls, emergency meetings, and hastily arranged flights. Our tiny office transformed into a command center as we brought in our lawyers, financial advisors, and key team members to address the sudden spotlight on Connect Care. The first call with Daniel Rodriguez of Pharmac confirmed what Jasmine had told me. They were indeed serious about acquisition talks, though they hadn't intended for the news to leak quite so dramatically. Their legal team was handling the premature disclosure, but now that the cat was out of the bag, they wanted to accelerate our discussions. Your timing couldn't have been better with our algorithm breakthrough, Daniel said during our video conference. Our clinical research team validated your results this morning. It's exactly what we've been looking for. By Sunday evening, we had a preliminary term sheet from Pharmac, outlining a potential acquisition valued at $950 million in cash and stock options. Samuel, our lawyer, pointed out that this was less than the billion-dollar figure mentioned in the media. They're testing to see if the publicity has gone to your heads, he explained. Standard negotiation tactic. They know the technology is worth more than this, especially with the publicity driving up perceived value. Jasmine and I spent that night reviewing every detail of Pharmac's proposal. The question isn't just about the money, Jasmine said, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. It's about control. If we sell outright, we can't guarantee they'll use the technology the way we intended. She was right. The algorithm we built wasn't just a clever piece of technology. It was a mission to fundamentally change how patients with rare diseases access treatment. In the wrong hands, it could become just another tool for pharmaceutical profit maximization, rather than patient benefit. By Monday morning, my phone was ringing constantly with calls from family members I hadn't heard from in years. Second cousins, my father's former colleagues. Even Timothy tried to reach me. His text message, a masterpiece of casual reconnection, made no mention of how he'd walked out when things got tough. Heard about your success. Always knew you had it in you. Coffee sometime. I left it unanswered. My mother called 3 times before I finally picked up Monday afternoon. Rachel, we just want to know you're okay, she said, her voice tentative. It's been all over the news. Your father's colleagues are calling to ask about you. I'm fine, Mom, I replied, trying to keep the edge from my voice. Just extremely busy. Of course, she said quickly. We don't want to bother you. But your father would like to talk to you. He feels terrible about Saturday. I closed my eyes, remembering the look on his face as he proclaimed that Emily had made partner while I played entrepreneur. The memory still stung, despite everything that had happened since. I can't talk to him right now, I said finally. I'm in the middle of the most important business negotiations of my life. Tell him I'll call when things settle down. There was a pause. He's very proud of you, Rachel. Now he is, I couldn't help saying, now that other people have validated what I'm doing. My mother didn't argue the point. Will you at least let us know what you decide about the acquisition? Yes, I promised. I'll keep you updated. That evening, as Jasmine and I were reviewing a counterproposal with Samuel, there was a knock at our office door. To my astonishment, Emily stood there, holding a bottle of champagne and looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Your secretary let me up, she explained, though we didn't have a secretary. I thought you might need a break, and maybe some legal perspective from someone who's on your side. I hesitated, still feeling the sting of her participation in the intervention. I brought the good stuff, she added, lifting the champagne. Dom Perignon. Partner-level celebration material. Despite myself, I smiled. Come in. Emily sat with us for the next 3 hours, reviewing Pharmac's terms with the sharp eye of a corporate attorney. She pointed out several clauses that would have limited our future involvement with the technology after acquisition. If maintaining control of how your technology is used matters to you, she said, looking between Jasmine and me, you should be pushing for a partnership structure, not a complete acquisition. Let them license the technology while you maintain ownership and oversight. Jasmine looked at me, eyebrows raised. That's actually brilliant. It would mean less money up front, Emily cautioned, but potentially more control and more long-term value if the technology performs as well as you believe it will. I studied my sister, seeing her in a new light. Why are you helping us like this? Emily set down her champagne glass. Because I was wrong, she said simply. I bought into Dad's perspective without really understanding what you were building. And because you're my sister, and I don't want you to get screwed in the biggest deal of your life, just because tech acquisitions are my specialty. The next morning, we presented a counterproposal to Pharmac. A strategic partnership instead of an acquisition, with a licensing structure that would provide immediate capital, while allowing us to maintain control over the core technology and its implementation. To our surprise, Daniel Rodriguez didn't immediately reject the idea. Let me take this to the board, he said. They were interested in acquisition for the simplified structure, but your technology is unique enough that they might consider alternatives. On Wednesday afternoon, my father appeared at our office. He stood awkwardly in the reception area, looking out of place among the whiteboards covered in code and the young programmers rushing about. Rachel, he said when I emerged from my office, could we speak privately? I led him to a small conference room and closed the door. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I owe you an apology, he finally said. I was wrong about your company, about your vision. Yes, you were, I agreed, not making it easier for him. He nodded, accepting this. I've spent my career working within established systems. When you talked about disrupting healthcare matching, I couldn't see it because I've only ever experienced the traditional pathways. But I've been reading about what you've built. It's remarkable. Coming from my father, this was significant. Thank you, I said simply. Your mother and I. He hesitated. We were afraid for you. The startup world is so uncertain, and we've seen how hard you've been working with seemingly little to show for it. But that's how innovation works, Dad, I explained. There's a long period where you're building and refining and testing, and nothing seems to be happening from the outside. Then suddenly everything changes. He nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand that. I just want you to know that regardless of what happens with Pharmac, I am proud of what you've created. The words I'd wanted to hear for so long now felt bittersweet. I appreciate that, I said carefully, but I wish you could have been proud of the work itself, not just the valuation or the public recognition. My father looked down at his hands. That's fair. I have some learning to do about how I measure success. He looked up again. For what it's worth, I think you should maintain control of your technology. From what I understand about your platform, it has the potential to help many patients. That shouldn't be lost in corporate acquisition. As he left, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication, lingering hurt, but also the first tentative steps toward a new understanding between us. That evening, Pharmac came back with their response. They would agree to a partnership structure with a $500 million upfront payment for exclusive licensing rights, plus performance-based incentives that could ultimately exceed the original acquisition offer. Most importantly, Connect Care would maintain ownership of our core technology and have contractual guarantees about how it would be implemented. Jasmine and I looked at each other across the conference table. What do you think? She asked. I thought about all we had built, all we had sacrificed. I thought about my family's intervention and the dramatic reversal that followed. I thought about patients like Eliza who needed our technology to reach its full potential. I think we've built something too important to sell completely, I said finally. I think we take the partnership deal and keep building. Jasmine grinned. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. 3 months later, Connect Care had transformed beyond recognition. Our new headquarters occupied 3 floors of a sleek downtown building, a far cry from the cramped office apartment where Jasmine and I had spent countless sleepless nights. Our team had grown from 5 to 50, with specialized departments for algorithm development, patient advocacy, clinical partnership, and regulatory compliance. The $500 million licensing payment from Pharmac had provided immediate stability, while allowing us to maintain ownership and direction of our technology. The partnership structure had proven even more valuable than we anticipated. Pharmac's global reach and regulatory expertise accelerated our implementation timeline by years, while our continued innovation kept improving the core matching algorithm. Most importantly, we were helping patients. Within 3 months of our expanded launch, we had successfully matched over 5,000 patients with rare diseases to appropriate specialists or clinical trials. The testimonials flooded in daily. Families who had spent years searching for answers finally finding paths forward through our platform. The personal changes were just as dramatic. I had purchased a comfortable condo in the city. Nothing ostentatious, but a genuine home rather than a converted office space with a mattress on the floor. Jasmine had paid off her parents' mortgage and set up college funds for her nieces and nephews. We were both still working intense hours, but now from a place of choice rather than desperate necessity. My relationship with my family had evolved into something more complex but ultimately healthier. The monthly dinners at my parents' house had resumed, but the dynamic had shifted significantly. Pass the potatoes, will you, Rachel? My father asked during one such dinner in June. I was reading about your expansion into European markets. Thanks, Dad, I said, passing the dish. Our compliance team has been working closely with the EU health authorities. It's complex, but we're making progress. Emily, who had recently taken on some pro bono work for patient advocacy groups, chimed in. The European privacy laws around patient data are particularly challenging. How are you handling the GDPR compliance? The conversation flowed into a technical discussion of international healthcare regulations, territory where my father and sister were genuinely interested and engaged, rather than dismissive. My mother watched with a small smile, occasionally contributing, but mostly seeming content to witness this new family dynamic. After dinner, my father invited me into his study, once an intimidating space where he would deliver assessments of my life choices, now more neutral territory. I've been thinking a lot about our conversation when I came to your office, he said, settling into his leather chair, about measuring success differently. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. I read about a patient in Cleveland who accessed an experimental treatment through your platform, he said. A 7-year-old with progressive muscular atrophy who had been declined for 3 previous trials. The article mentioned that doctors estimated she would have had less than a year left without this treatment. Sophie Richardson, I confirmed. Her case was particularly challenging because her genetic variant didn't fit the typical profile. Our algorithm identified subtle patterns that matched her with a trial that had more flexible inclusion criteria. My father was quiet for a moment. That's the kind of success that matters, isn't it? Not just valuations and acquisitions. It's why we built Connect Care, I said simply. The business success enables us to help more patients, but the patients are the point. He nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand that better. He cleared his throat. Your old boyfriend called me at the hospital last week. Timothy? I asked, surprised. Yes. Apparently he couldn't reach you directly, wanted to reconnect, and thought I might facilitate. My father's expression was carefully neutral, but I detected a hint of something protective. And what did you tell him? A small smile played at the corner of my father's mouth. I told him, my daughter is running a successful global healthcare platform and is extremely selective about her time commitments. I couldn't help but laugh. Thank you for that. The doorbell rang, and moments later my mother appeared at the study door. Rachel, there's a Melene Torres here to see you. She says you were expecting her. Melene Torres, the Wall Street Journal reporter whose article had changed everything, had reached out requesting an interview about the impact of Connect Care's technology on rare disease treatment. After careful consideration, I had agreed, suggesting she join us for dessert after our family dinner. Yes, we had arranged to meet here, I confirmed, standing up. She's writing a follow-up piece. My father raised his eyebrows, brave to invite the press to a family gathering. I smiled. I think we can handle it. Melene turned out to be nothing like the intimidating media personality I had imagined in her early 30s, with curly hair and bright, intelligent eyes. She asked thoughtful questions about both the technology and the human impact of our work. What surprised me about your story, she said as we settled in the living room with coffee and my mother's apple pie, was how you maintained control rather than taking the larger acquisition offer. That's unusual in the tech world, especially for a first-time founder. The technology we built serves a specific purpose, I explained. We were concerned that purpose might get lost in a complete acquisition. Rachel has always been principled, my mother interjected proudly, even as a child. Melene smiled. And how has the partnership structure worked out in practice? Better than we anticipated, I admitted. Pharmac brings resources and reach that would have taken us years to develop independently, while we maintain the core innovation that makes the system effective. And the personal impact? Melene asked, her gaze direct. Your life must have changed dramatically over the past few months. I considered this. Externally, yes. We have proper offices now, a growing team, financial stability. But the core of what we're doing, connecting patients with life-changing treatments, that's the same mission we started with. As the evening wound down, Emily walked Melene out while I helped my mother clear the dessert plates. You handled that interview beautifully, my mother said, rinsing a cup. Very poised. Thanks, Mom, I replied. It gets easier with practice. She set down the cup and turned to face me. I want to apologize again for that intervention. We were so wrong, and in such a public, hurtful way. I leaned against the counter. Why didn't you say anything that day? Before the Wall Street Journal notification? You just sat there while Dad and everyone else picked apart my choices. My mother sighed deeply. I was caught between what your father believed was best and what I feared might be true. I was worried about you, working so hard with so little recognition, but I should have spoken up. You should have, I agreed. I know, she said quietly. But I want you to know I always believed in you, Rachel, even when I was afraid for you. I reached out and squeezed her hand. I know, Mom. And we're finding a better way forward now. Later that night, as I drove back to my condo, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 3 months. The technology we had built was helping people in ways we had always envisioned, but had struggled to make others see. The validation had come, both financially and in terms of impact, but the vindication felt less important now than the work itself. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. Just got the European regulatory preliminary approval. We can start the U-pilot next month. Another milestone reached. Another step toward the vision we had held on to through 2 difficult years of doubt and dismissal. As I pulled into my parking space, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the success, but for the struggle that had shaped both our technology and my own resilience along the way. 1 year after the Wall Street Journal article that changed everything, Connect Care had evolved beyond what Jasmine and I had dared to imagine in those early days working from our converted apartment office. Our patient matching platform, now operated in 12 countries, had facilitated over 20,000 rare disease treatment connections, and had become the gold standard for clinical trial recruitment. The financial success was undeniable. Our partnership with Pharmac had exceeded performance metrics, triggering additional payments that brought our total compensation close to the original billion-dollar valuation. Jasmine and I had both become wealthy by any reasonable standard, though we remained actively involved in the company's operations and strategic direction. But the true measure of our success wasn't in bank accounts or valuations. It was in the emails, letters, and video messages that arrived daily from patients and families whose lives had been transformed through connections made on our platform. One Tuesday morning, I sat in our glass-walled conference room reviewing quarterly performance data when my assistant, Amanda, knocked gently. There's someone here to see you, she said. A Sophia Richardson and her mother. They don't have an appointment, but they were very hoping to meet you personally. I recognized the name immediately. The 7-year-old with progressive muscular atrophy whose case I had mentioned to my father months earlier. Please send them in, I said, closing my laptop. The girl who walked through the door looked nothing like the frail child I had seen in medical files. Sophia Richardson had bright eyes, pink-tinged cheeks, and moved with the careful but determined steps of someone regaining strength. Her mother, Catherine, followed close behind her, her expression a mixture of gratitude and wonder. Miss Bennett, Catherine began, her voice catching, we just wanted to thank you in person. The clinical trial your system matched Sophia with. The doctors are calling her response miraculous. Sophia looked up at me solemnly. Mom says your computer is magic, and found the medicine that fixed my muscles. I knelt to her level. Not magic, just very good at finding the right matches. But I'm so happy it helped. You. Me too, she said simply. I can go to school now, and dance class starts next week. The Richardsons stayed for nearly an hour. Catherine explained the transformation in clinical terms, how the gene therapy they had accessed through our platform had halted the progression of Sophia's disease and begun to reverse some of the damage. But it was the small details that moved me most. Sophia's excitement about joining a ballet class, her plans for Halloween, the ordinary childhood experiences that had seemed impossible a year earlier. After they left, I sat quietly in my office, processing the encounter. This was why we had persevered through 2 years of doubt and dismissal. This was what my family hadn't been able to see when they gathered for their intervention. My phone rang. Emily calling. Our relationship had evolved into something stronger and more equal over the past year. She had even helped establish a legal advocacy division within Connect Care that provided pro bono support to patients navigating insurance denials and treatment access issues. Are we still on for dinner tonight? She asked when I picked up. Dad's presenting some award at the Medical Association, so it's just us. Absolutely, I confirmed. I just met Sophia Richardson and her mother. Remember that case I told you about, the 7-year-old? That's amazing, Rachel. Bring the details tonight. I want to hear everything. Later that evening, over dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown, I told Emily about the Richardsons' visit. It's extraordinary what you've built, she said when I finished. Not just the technology, but the entire ecosystem around it. We've been lucky, I acknowledged. Emily shook her head firmly. No, that's what Dad would say to minimize what you've accomplished. This isn't luck. It's vision, persistence, and courage to keep going when everyone, including your family, told you to stop. I smiled at her directness. When did you become my biggest cheerleader? Probably around the time I realized how wrong I'd been, she admitted. And watching you navigate this past year with such grace and focus, it's been inspiring. Honestly, we talked about the mentorship program I had recently established for women entrepreneurs in healthcare technology. 10 promising founders were receiving funding, guidance, and access to our network resources that would have made all the difference during our difficult early years. I remember when you first told us you were leaving your job to start Connect Care, Emily said thoughtfully. Dad was horrified, but I was secretly envious. This surprised me. Envious? You were already on the partner track at a prestigious firm. Exactly, she said. I was on a track someone else had laid out. You were creating something entirely new. She sipped her wine. I never had the courage to deviate from the expected path. It's not too late, I pointed out. Your work with our legal advocacy division has made a huge difference for patients. She nodded slowly. It has. It's the most meaningful work I've done. Our conversation shifted to family matters, our father's gradual but significant evolution in how he viewed success, our mother's delight in telling her academic colleagues about Connect Care's impact, the upcoming holiday gatherings that no longer filled me with dread. As we were finishing dessert, my phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced down and couldn't help but laugh. What is it? Emily asked. Timothy again. Apparently, he's launched some kind of investment advisory service and wants to explore synergies with Connect Care. Emily rolled her eyes. The audacity of mediocre men never ceases to amaze me. I put my phone away without responding. Timothy's reappearance in my life, or attempts at it, had become a running joke between Jasmine and me. The man who couldn't see the value in what we were building when it mattered now couldn't stop trying to associate himself with our success. Walking back to my car after dinner, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 3 years. The struggle that had seemed so lonely at times had ultimately led to something far more meaningful than just personal success. We had built a technology that was changing lives, a company culture that valued innovation and compassion equally, and a model for how healthcare technology could prioritize patient outcomes alongside business viability. The family intervention that had felt so painful had become, in retrospect, the turning point that launched us into a new phase of growth and impact. Sometimes the lowest moments truly do precede the greatest breakthroughs. Back at home, I stood on my balcony overlooking the city lights, thinking about all the lessons this journey had taught me. True vision requires the courage to pursue what others cannot yet see. Validation from those who matter most sometimes comes later than we hope, but our worth doesn't depend on their recognition. Success isn't just about financial outcomes, but about the lives changed through our work. The path to meaningful innovation is rarely straight or smooth, and the darkest moments often come just before breakthrough. And perhaps most importantly, we must define success on our own terms, rather than accepting others' limited definitions.